essentially my journey towards an end which I set for myself. One of the major problems of any art historian in India is the fact of anonymity. Very few names are known, and if names are known, they're like fireflies in the night. You catch them or you miss them. And the whole idea of writing an art history which does not have any names prominently in our awareness is hard. In a very small area of Indian painting, Pahadi painting, I began a number of years ago and faced with the same problem. I had in my head a kind of a notion that Indian painting should not be classified as by state-wise and so on and so forth. This is Kangra, this is Guler, this is Nurpur, this is Udaipur, and this is Bikaner and so on. But essentially I thought it was in the tradition of the Gharana system of Indian music, where the things stayed within one particular family. It expanded, was not abandoned. So with that notion in my mind, long years ago, I was in London with a friend of mine, whom I admired a great deal, W.G. Archer, whom Nirmala ji has mentioned. And as I was leaving, Bill Archer said to me, just en passant, I wish we knew a little more about these wretched artists. Now, whether they're wretched or not, but they were artists, all right. And it's stuck in my mind. Why can't we make some inquiry into who these people were, where they lived, how they lived, and so on? So when I came back from London, and I was just a Nausicaa at that time, wet behind the ears, as far as art history at least is concerned. And I decided, let me try and see if I can locate some information. So I got you here under false pretenses. I'm not going to talk about these paintings. I'm going to talk about how, essentially, I got to track down a number of artists and how it helped to a certain extent in buttressing my idea of how paintings should be classified. I'll take you through this rather slowly. If you walk through the Kangra Valley or the lower hills of the Himachal area, you are completely entranced because the beauty of nature there is extraordinary. The people are simple, very relatively simple, and sociable. And I fell in love with that particular area. But still, not much information. I contacted the number of artist families which have survived, some little information, but nothing you could tie down. And then I decided, let me try it and see if I can succeed in getting hold of the information on these artists in a different fashion. Now, these paintings are seductive, as you can see, like this. And you don't blame me if I wanted to know who were the people who painted these. Extraordinary works of art, all from the same region. So they are not only seductive in their own way, but they are layered things, and it is profitable, it is beneficial perhaps, to try and see who the people were who thought like this. So with this at the back of my mind, and with the desire to know something more about who these people were, I decided, as I said a moment ago, to go a different route and see if I can locate any information. I was at that particular time visiting a friend of mine who lived in Kurukshetra at the university. He was a professor at that university, and I was just spending a few days with him. In the morning he would go off and I would just be left twiddling my thumbs at his home. So I decided, let me see if I can find out anything from the Pandas, the priests who keep these records of people who have visited them. In the Pahadi area, I had very often heard a phrase, अगर आप जीते जी हरिद्वार नहीं गए तो मर के जरूर जाएंगे, right? If you've never been to Haridwar, you will certainly land up there when you are dead, because the ashes will have to be immersed in the Ganga. And I remembered that in these places of pilgrimage, especially Haridwar and now Kurukshetra where I was, next to that is a place called Pehova. And I said, let me see if I can locate any information in the records which these people keep. I remember from my own childhood, when I visited Haridwar long years ago with my father, and a priest had approached him, or he had approached the priest, and after doing the necessary rituals and so on, having performed these. So I remember having gone there, and I remember my father writing down something about his visit to that particular place in the bahi. Bahi is a pothis, the big volume, tome of the Panda who had served him or who had performed the ritual for him. I was very young at that time, and I was asked also to write my name in it. And I remember having written down my name and misspelled it. I just learned to write in English, and I remember that quite well afterwards. My father pointed out to me, this is not how you spell your name, something like that. So this had stuck in my mind. And I went to this particular place in Kurukshetra. There's an area called the Surya Kund, an area called Sannihit tank and so on, and I knew that the Pandas all gathered around in that area. My friend introduced me to somebody who said, go there. So I landed up at that particular place. And I started asking the Pandas. I said, I am here to inquire into the painters of the Punjab Hill, or the Pahadi area. Painters are called chiteras in the Pahadi area. Chitrakar, chitera. No, koi nahi hai. There's a standard answer I got. Koi chitera nahi hai. I said, aapke records mein kuch hai? Nahi, kuch nahi hai. Maine, acha, gaon bataiye. So I had the name of a village to which this particular family belonged, of painters, called Samloti. Samloti. Some people come here from Samloti, but no chitera, because they died out. And their business essentially of the Pandas keeping these records is of people who really keep coming. So I said, let me have a look at this. The one Panda, Pandit Shadi Lal, I remember the name, brought out a tome this size, really. It was difficult to lift it. And he said, ye hai, Kangra ki bahi, इसमें है समलोटी भी होगा आपने देखना देख लीजिए हमें कुछ पता नहीं. It was as straightforward as that. So with his permission, I said, can I leaf through this? Yes. 2 reservations. He said, are you a painter yourself? I said, no, I'm not a painter. I am an honest to God historian and I do different things. So, तो आप क्यों खोज रहे हैं? What is it that you're looking for? Why are you researching these? And I said, then it occurred to me, the Sanskrit word might make an impression upon them. I said, मैं विद्योपार्जन के लिए आया हूँ. I'm here to gather information, knowledge, and so on. That made an impression. So Vidyoparjan was my declared aim. And he said, अच्छा ये लीजिए. मैंने कहा, आपको दिक्कत क्या है? If I'm not a painter myself, then why can't I look at the records of the painter? He says, these records are admissible in courts of law as evidence in property disputes. And we are under an obligation not to reveal the record of one particular family to another family. Fair enough. So I said, let me have a look at this. He said, आप यहाँ बैठ जाइए. He spread a chatai on the bank of that particular tank, and I sat there. 3 days, from morning till evening, I sat there. Flipping open one folio, trying to see what is in it, second folio, third folio. And I remember exactly on the 4th afternoon, the sun was about to set and my time was drawing to a close. I opened the sheet and there was one entry of 4 or 5 lines. Chitere samloti ke. Buddhu, Rattu, Purukhu ke bete, something like this and so on. I knew that I was on to something. If there's chiteras in this particular bahi, then there would be chiteras in some other bahi also. So, with that little nugget of information in my hand, I remind you, the subtitle of my lecture is A Personal Journey, which I'm taking you through, right? So there is no philosophy, there's no concept, there's nothing in this. It's just a sharing of information with you. So I sat there and did that. And then I got to know other people and still more people and still more people and so on. Went to Pehova, then went to Haridwar and so on and so on. But to go to Haridwar for this is a very, very exciting, at the same time nerve-wracking experience. Let's say I am a pilgrim. I have gone in a bus to Haridwar. I get off the bus, and the moment I get off the bus, then a group of people, some 20 odd, would surround me. They all know that the people come here as pilgrims. There was the first question. Everyone has the same question on their lips. Where are you from? What is your native village? If I were to say I'm from Chandigarh, nobody knows Chandigarh. Chandigarh doesn't exist in their records, right? I said, which means which is your original village? And I would say I am from Sargodha. And you could see you could hear almost the worrings of their minds and so on, because they have it all in their heads, right? Sargodha. And the moment I say Sargodha, Pakistan, then a number of them disappear. They have no interest in me at all. Kaun jaat? What caste are you? And I said, I'm Goswami. Two kinds of Goswami. There are Goramwada Goswami, Mula Santi. What Goswami are you? I said, I'm a Mula Santi. The moment I say Mula Santi Goswami, then another four would disappear into the darkness. They have no interest in me at all. Mula Santi. And then you can hear them talk to themselves. Mula Santi. Sahiwal. I said, yeah, that's my native village, Sahiwal, in Sargodha district. And so, So two of them are left. And one of them would just say, Aapke dada ka naam? I said, Dada ka naam Gosai Shankar Sahai. And then he would catch me by the arm, put me in a rickshaw, take me into the town, and in a hole in the wall, which is a shop of theirs and so on, he sat down, pulled out opened a cupboard which had seen better days and so on, and then flipped it open. In the twinkling of an eye, a sheet where I could see my father's signatures, my grandfather's name, and so on and so forth. The entire list of names of members of my family who had either been to Haridwar or whose names have been provided to the Panda by the person who was visiting. This is the way it goes. It is exciting. It, as I said, nerve-wracking on the one hand because you're surrounded with noise. Haridwar is a place one has to go to at least once in a lifetime before one dies. Then afterwards, of course, one will. And so there we are. So it is this kind of information which is available at these particular places, which I was seeking. These places can be maddening. It's an old photograph, very, very old photograph, and you can see zillions of people. This is how these people must have traveled in their own times. Moving, let us say, if you are coming from Guler or Kangra or Nurpur or Suket or something like this and so on, going to Haridwar on a pilgrimage. Then the whole families would move, it would take them not weeks but sometimes months to travel and so on. They would set up camps, etc. This is a painting from the Bhagavad Puran, but literally speaking, this is the way it would have been. And once you get to that, this is a photograph I took in Allahabad, because I was now tracking this thing down from place to place in the course of my research in these particular areas. I was in Kurukshetra, in Pehova, in Martand in Kashmir, in Benares, in Gaya, in Allahabad, Jwalamukhi, Chintapurni, and so on, like that. And the sights you see there, the pilgrims who come by the droves, and the kind of faith with which they approach these pandas, the performance of a ritual. The Panda would ask you to sit down here, aap kahan ke aaye, kaise aaye, kya hua? And then you say something about this, because an aunt of mine has died and I want to do the the karma and so on, karma kand ka jo hota hai, and so on. So these people who have all probably come from one particular village, and one particular Panda and his munims and so on are serving them, and they would all have their heads shaven, for instance, here, and he would have like this sitting. Just look at this. This is the atmosphere at these places. Extraordinary, really. I mean, it's a world that you and I sitting here in the IGNC in Delhi cannot possibly imagine the ambience, the feeling, the electricity in the air when these things are being done. Dharamsalas have been opened, and where people come and then they set up home there, clothes have been washed, food is being cooked and so on, people are walking about. This is the atmosphere in these places. This is taken in Kurukshetra. So there are all kinds of things happening in these places of pilgrimage. There's a Pandit Sanudat who used to run a Vedic workshop, Pathshala, in that particular place, and I was taking a photograph, and one of them stopped me, one of the snataks and so on. No, ruki, hamari gaye nahi hai isme. So the cow was sort of marched in because they wanted to take a photograph with the cow whom they worshipped, like this and so on. This is from Kurukshetra. Pilgrims come. They do not know anyone. The Panda performs a very useful function. He tells them where to stay, leads them to the place where to eat, perform a ritual, make an entry and go. So there are these people who have come, and the Pandit who is there in the dhoti in the middle with his back towards us, Pandit Madan Mohan, he's inquiring. This is not as crowded as Haridwar, but he's inquiring, kahan se aaye? Because that is where he would decide. This is me, towards the extreme right. And I went to Pehova, and there is this gentleman, the oldest gentleman, and his son, who had done an MA in history from my university, and gone back to his Pandagiri in Pehova. And so there, it's a posed photograph you can see. Right, I'm asking questions, and that Pandit is asking me like this and so on, kahan se hain, kaun jaat ke hain, things like this and so on. This is the way it goes. In Pehova, which is next to Kurukshetra, a young boy had arrived at that particular time, his father had passed away, and the Pandits are performing a ritual for him seated on the floor. I'm just creating for you the atmosphere at these particular places. Pandit Sthanu Datta, who was the librarian of the Kurukshetra University for a number of years, learned man, came from a Panda's family. Allahabad, on the banks of the Triveni, the Ganga, the Punjabi Purohit. There are not many Punjabis who land up there or survive, and so on. But they have announced, very prominently Punjabi Purohit, Panda Puran, and so on, like this and so on, with the books open in front of them. I cannot lift that volume, which this Panda, this gentleman who was asking me a question in a photograph I showed a moment ago, is leafing through. And it'll give you an idea of how voluminous these records are, how extraordinarily well classified, categorized, ordered, organized, and so on they are, like this. And the young generation is being brought up. The memories of these people, of the Pandas, are astonishing. If I've given you an example, I get off the bus at Haridwar and then ask me, kahan ke ho, kaun jaat, mula santi hai, ye wo. All this and so on and so forth is in their heads. They know these people are our yajamans, our priests. If you you can't go there now, but if you went to Mutton in Kashmir, the kind of surroundings that you find there, and all of them are wearing these big labadas and so on, woolen things, they're walking like penguins, and they all sort of come to you and so on, ask the same questions and so on. I saw with a Panda in Mutton a long time ago a bahi, and this man was paraded before me because somebody thought, because I had got off a car or something. He said, must be a sahib, and so on. He said, Angrezon ka panda bhi yahan pe hai. And I said, Angrezon ka panda, and I didn't understand what that meant. Then they really was that man only catered to Europeans. And the entries in those leaves were very, very refreshing, shall we say, or amusing. This man has performed no function for me except holding the ink pot in which I'm dipping. One man has done, right? Or the fish in this tank are lovely, but alas, they are holy, or something like this. Nothing to do with genealogy, nothing to do with where they are from and so on, but just for the sake of fun. Pandit Ram Bahadur of Kurukshetra. These men became friends of mine, and they opened themselves up. And I remember them with fondness and gratitude, because it is through them that I was able to begin my journey on collecting information for 3 years more or less of my life. After I had gotten to know that these records are there, one has only to locate them. I did nothing else except move from one place of pilgrimage to the other, back, this and that and so on. Pandit Ram Bahadur, and this is Pandit Madan Mohan. This is his place of business. These are his tools. An ink pot, a Suchi Patra, a thin little volume which has an index of villages, and a big bahi, some other notes and so on. Pandit Madan Mohan. Remarkable man. It is just kindness itself, and I remember him every single time I talk about the Pandas. And he would open this. Photo lena? Ye lijiye. Like this. Now that photograph, that page which is open vertically, you can see that, is of a Nawab of Javra. It's kind of a little state in Haryana. A Muslim, obviously a Nawab, who as a pilgrim had come to Kurukshetra and written this particular thing down with a stamp or seal on it. The most extraordinary things you come across, see, hear, sense, feel in these places. Pandit Madan Mohan again. You'll forgive the quality of these photographs. These were taken 40 years ago with an Agfa Optima camera that I had or something like this and so on. So they're all aged and, they've seen better times or whatever. In Jwalamukhi, a group of Pandas. This is the entry which I, for the first time, saw. Chatere Samloti Ke. Painters of the village Samloti. And then the genealogy. Ram Krishna Chandanu Ruldu Ram Dayal Put Bete Dhummu Ke Pote Dharu Ke Padote Gido Ke and so on and so forth. Sons of so and so, grandsons of so and so, whose father was so and so, like this and so on. And then towards the very end, at the last, precisely the name of the exact person who had come, who had given them this information, and a date, somewhat 1936, which comes to about 1880. Pandon ka karyalay wahan pe, there is and they have their own sort of place in Kurukshetra. Purohiton ka karyalay, yatri apne saman ke khud zimmewar hai, some warnings and things like this and so on. So it is a world in itself, this small particular thing. These Pandas, a group of them, I know their names, but you may not be interested in them. I wanted them to pose for me with their bahis, and you can see that all of them, the 7 or 8 bahis, tied up like this and so on. The system is something which I would like to sort of explain at length, but there's not enough time, and you may not have the necessary patience. And I said, "Ek aur tasveer khenche." Then they stood for me on the near that particular tank, and so on. These are the men who are guardians of these treasures that I'm speaking of. It is, of course, their bread and butter. Of course, they make money out of it. But who would grudge them that? Because they perform the most extraordinary function. Nothing quite like this exists, as far as I know, other than family Bibles and so on, in Europe. anywhere. The oldest records I've seen with my own eyes goes back to the 16th century. Right? Yeah, people, poor and rich, page after page, filled absolutely to the brim with text. Chatere, Isar Ram Dayal, Arjun Bete Bensiye ke, then Ram Krishan and so on like this. And they would leave spaces in between because 10 years later, 20 years later, 5 years later, somebody from the same family would come and his entry would be joined to the entry of the family which is above that. Sometimes people from different professions like sunars, goldsmiths. Goldsmiths are also expert in making designs. So some goldsmith has left a sign manual there. I mean, you can see Sunar, Tank, Munna, Popi, Jairam, and so on and so forth. And they made some design, Vishnu Bhagwan, and a bird or a flower over there, like this. Again, Sunar, Tank, Bari. Tirkhan Chatere, because these painters come from the carpenter community. And so, Molak Thakuruka, Garba Chhajju, Mutuke, and so on. So and so is the son of so and so, but my cousins are son of so and so, like that, and so on. Pote Nikuke and Uttara Sangaru, Bhisham, and so on. Nobody else from that family seems to have come. The last date is 1921, Samvat, 1850. There are bahis full of extraordinary range of scripts. I can't read any of this. But somebody, some South Indian group, Srimate Ramanujaya Namaha, somebody has written, the Panda has written like that. I mean, the Pilgrim has written in his own script. And the Panda makes an excerpt of that or a précis of that and so on and adds it for his own record. You know, there's something mesmerizing about these records because the moment you touch a sheet of paper in these, you know that you're touching history. You know the past is embedded in these folios. These are saintly people who come from somewhere. Srimati Ramanuj Guru and his sort of followers or whatever, and then they put all their names down. And then, of course, the Tilak marks have become the signs manual of these people, the Shankha, the Namam, and the Chakra, and so on, like that, and so on. Chatere, Vasi Chambeke, Chatere, Kishan Jwala, and so on, like that. And Chamba Sheher at the very top. By the time I had finished those 2.5 to 3 years, I had a census, if you could like to say, of the names of painters about whom nothing had been known till that time. Virtually nothing. I had a few names which I had heard in the field, Tirkhan Chatere, Vasi Nurpur ke, Tirkhan again, like that. When people moved to these places of pilgrimage in the past, they would carry with them royal families and so on, would always have a Moharwala with them, who would be the bearer of the seal of the state. Or people with some power, some influence, some status and so on, they would all have their own seals, and so the seals have been put in. One of the functions of making these entries is this, that we have today recognize this particular Panda as our family priest. Anyone who belongs to my family henceforward shall also recognize the descendants of this particular priest from the future. Right? Je ko mere khandane da hoye se tinu manne. In Pahadi they would write. Right? Isne asa dena inane pujna, like this in Pahadi. That we are the givers and they are the receivers of whatever we are able to offer them and so on, like that. So a commitment is made in these records which binds the future generations to be attached to this particular. Not anybody can go. Not anybody can go to any Panda. You have to go to your own family Panda, because he would be able to authenticate the fact that his ancestors or he were serving your family at this particular place. I don't think you are too interested in this. But I just am the range of things that I'm showing you. But it is interesting, very, very interesting for me as a student of history. This is entry by the Nawab of Javra that I was talking about. And the Nawab has put his Saad towards the very top. Saad means Sadiq, which means it's correctly entered. The text is in Persian, and this was in the possession of Pandit Madan Mohan of Kurukshetra. Then, at Kurukshetra, I found the entry relating to a family that I was in hot pursuit of, a painter by the name of Nansuk, on whom later on I wrote a whole book. Nansuk belonged to Guler. Nansuk himself shifted after some time from Guler to Basuli, which is on the other side of the Ravi in the Jammu area. And there his descendants were settled, and this entry dated 1884 Samvat, which means 1827 AD, is made by the grandson of Nansuk. Because it was being done in Kurukshetra, these people were so extraordinarily alive to the appropriateness of a place that because it is Kurukshetra, therefore the man must have picked up the pen with which he was writing and drawn quickly the Upadesh of Krishna to Arjuna, the Bhagavad Gita. So he draws a chariot, Krishna facing Arjuna, Arjuna sitting there, a pennant sort of flowing in the air above that, and so on. And then it is interesting. He says, we are here in Basoli, but our collaterals are in such and such a place, in the Guler area, things like this. Devi Ditta, great grandson of Nansuk, Chatere Basi, Purani Guler ke. And then he says, Devi Ditta says, Rahen Lahore Machi Hatte mein Kanhaiya Kapoor ki gali Bulaki Misr ka ghar. So they moved from there, from Guler, and now are in Lahore, and it gives exactly the place where his house is now. Kanhaiya Kapoor ki gali and such ka Misr ka ghar, and so on. And he draws, because he is in Haridwar, so he draws the Ganga, appropriately, of course, on that. But this is a leaf on which I'll spend a minute or two of your time, because it has been revelatory as far as my own work is concerned. It concerns the painter Nansuk. I was in Haridwar. This was not my first visit, third or fourth visit. I had the right connections because the family which lived close by, related to me, they had given the right kind of reference to me, to this particular Panda's family and so on. And I was staying in a Gita Bhavan, kind of a Dharmshala, and the Panda was contacted by me. The family of Sardar Ram Rakha, Pandit Ram Kumar, his younger brother, Pandit Krishna Kumar. Pandit Ram Kumar I contacted. I said, Guler ki bahi dekhni hai. Hai? That's good. Hai to hai. Lekin ek dikkat hai, he said. There's one major problem. Why? It is in the court. It has been produced in the court. It is locked in the court's records. And you know courts, it can stay locked for 35 years. Right? The way things go. So, it is a part of the official record. You could see I was very disappointed. Then I stayed there. I was doing some other things, looking at other records and so on. So on the fourth day, I think, or maybe the third day, towards the evening, he came to the Gita Bhavan. I was staying on the upper story of the Gita Bhavan. And he had a little basta under his arm and a kambal around his body. And he said, Aapko Guler ka dekhna hai, lijiye. So he produced that bahi, which he had somehow, one way or the other, through deceit, through money or whatever, gotten out of the court's records and brought it for me to look at. And you can imagine my state, Guler, I hadn't, and then I started leafing through that and I came upon this. In the hand of Nansuk, one of the greatest painters we know from the Pahadi area, in his own hand. And this is how he writes in 9 lines. Gotra Sandal. Nansuk was a learned man. Not only literate, but learned. And Nansuk has a sense of the appropriate, which is beyond compare as far as these people are concerned. And he starts writing. Likhtam Naina Tarkhan Chatarera Gulere da Basi Beta Seveda Potra Hasnueda Padpotra Bharthueda, and then with the Padpotra, then Dateda. They're going 5 generations back. Right? Nobody does that. And then he enters the name of his maternal ancestors. Nanaka Pak Likhya, from mother's side. And then he says, Purohit Hari Ram Manya. I believe, or I have recognized this Pandit by the name of Hari Ram. And then it says, then it gives the Nanaka Pak, Nana Das Padnana Chudu with Padnana Hariya. And then he adds a rider. Je Paye Manke da Kise Horde Hath Nikle, Tse Likhya Parman. His elder brother Manaku, painter whom I am researching at this moment. If the writing of my elder brother Manaku shows up in the book of some other Panda, that would be more authentic than this Panda who is now presenting himself as my family priest. Talking about personal journeys, this is what it was. So, leaf after leaf in these records. Nika, Godu, Nikka, Nansuke, Sevke, Tarkhan Chitere, Noorpur, Jyoti, Jala, Padmanabh, and so some names stick in my mind. Then, a generation later, another painter comes from the same family, writes down this and so on, and then draws the same drawing on top of that, not 1/4 as good, 1/10 as good as Nansuk's own, towards the top. Interestingly, very interestingly, and I'm not going to keep you for more than 5 more minutes. After entering the details of the family, because the old man who Ranja has come, so he says, Vahan se last Sukhdayal aaye samvat 1884, Chaitra Shuddhi Gaya ko gaye sab kathe. They are on their way to Gaya in Bihar, right, where more rituals have to be performed. So you can imagine. Starting from Basoli, up in the hills, coming down to Kurukshetra Pehova. From here they must have gone to Haridwar, from there to Allahabad, from there on to Gaya, and something like that. Must have taken them years of travel. At Haridwar, at Allahabad, Sangam, there are some extraordinary sights to be seen, the kinds that I talked about. All these pilgrims for a dip in the Triveni. A sense of community develops, a sense of belonging, and you are in an instant joined to the past. This is the inside of the Karyalaya or office of the main Panda who has his Munims. I'm not saying that this child has learnt everything, but this is the atmosphere in these places. The children are taught by the Pandas to memorize 3 leaves of this particular bahi today and repeat them to me. Names which mean nothing to them, right? Just names. So-and-so, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, so like that and so on. Phenomenal memories like this and so on. This is one of the earliest records I was able to photograph. Samvat 1664. That is 1607. 2 years after Akbar had died. So Maharaja, the man, this royal seal of the state. But this is a state in which a large number of these records now are. This is inside the Purohiton ka Karyalaya, which I showed you a photograph of. This is how these bahis are lying. Because most of the Pandas are essentially interested in current bahis, current pilgrimages. So the old things are preserved, but if you can call them preserved, they are kept, shall we say, in this fashion. I'm talking, this is a photograph about 55 years ago, 50 years ago. That's what they're looking like. And it's a desperate need to do something about them. A desperate need even to try and understand what these records can do in terms of our understanding of the past. And whole studies can be done upon these, anthropological, sociological, linguistic, and so on and so forth, script-wise and so on, structures. But who cares? Who cares? Except when someone like this, me, lands up and discovers a thing like this. I'm sorry I've cheated you of paintings, but I had declared it as my aim not to talk about paintings but about these records. May I thank you very much, K.I. Jain Sir.